Welcome everyone to the BKTK Meetup on mobile commerce with the inimitable and phenomenal Gilt Groupe. So for those of you who have never been to a BKTK event, first of all, show of hands, how many of you have never been to one of our BKTK meetups? Wow. Okay, well, we love first-timers. And so as a brief introduction, BKTK stands for Brooklyn Design and Technology, although we are expanding now to Manhattan. And so the key idea here is to be the intersection of technology, design, and entrepreneurship. And we've recently begun a new event structure with 2 speakers, and we have a tripartite overall structure. So the first segment will be the moderated discussion, and then a very interactive, energetic, immersive Q&A with you guys, although of course we'll be asking for your feedback and insights during the discussion itself where necessary. And then at the very end, the best part is about half an hour to an hour of informal networking over booze and snacks. So with that being said, my name is Yin, and I work at a company called 10 Speed Labs. We are a full-service creative and tech agency, and we organize and sponsor BKTK. And it works really well because we also are at this intersection of creative, tech, and entrepreneurs. And so it's very much in alignment with our vision, and we really like to bring people together from diverse backgrounds in conversation. The key idea of the meetup is to generate ideas through organic, living conversation. And of course, this wouldn't be possible without Third Ward, our wonderful event sponsor. And I would like to hand over the mic to the event's organizer, Lisa, to give you some more information about Third Ward.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. I do see a lot of unfamiliar faces, so I'm guessing that for a lot of you, this is your first time here. I'm not sure if any of you have already heard of Third Ward or what we have going on here, but in case you don't know, I'll give you a little background on the types of events that we do. We are about 30,000 square feet of shared workspace, so that means we have a shared metal shop, a shared wood shop, a jewelry studio, a photo studio, and a co-working space. I imagine a lot of you work in technology. If you're ever looking for a space to work out of, we have a co-working space upstairs that you can always come, do a free day. For a lot of people who are freelancing or working from home, it could be a nice alternative. In addition to that, we do over 200 classes in everything from art and design to furniture making, photography, programming, digital design. Everything is on our website. It's just thirdward.com, so I definitely recommend you check that out. And lastly, we do tours of the space every day. So if you want to get a little bit more of in-depth information and want to come take a look, there's tour times listed on our website. So it's thirdward.com. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And just to add to her comment about the diversity of workshops they have here, you can literally find any class in anything that falls under the realm of arts and crafts. And I think one of their best classes is woodworking. This very table was designed by a student here. So as you can see, it's pretty solid.
Just don't sit in it, because we almost fell off.
Right. That's the one caveat. Do not sit on the table, even after 2 rounds of drinks. So with that, the topic of tonight's discussion is mobile commerce, and we're going to be more design focused. But of course, we can't talk design without talking about marketing and general strategy. And the basic big question tonight is, what is the mobile commerce, the mobile shopping experience, or what should it be? So of course, none other than Gilt Groupe would be best positioned to address that, as they are the leaders of this mCommerce industry. Now, just before introducing our speakers tonight, I'd like to give a brief overview of mCommerce and the general landscape. It is the fastest growing retail segment right now. So right now, you are in a very good space to hear about innovations in a place that will keep expanding. And some key facts here. In 2011, total sales were $13.6 billion for mobile shopping. Last year, it grew to $24.8 billion. This year, sales hit $38.8 billion. And anyone could guess what will happen in 2017. This is all from eMarketer, by the way. general guess? You are very close.
I think it's 71, isn't it?
Less close. But then again, maybe eMarketer isn't the legitimate source here. $108.56 billion of sales from mobile shopping. How many of you have bought something on your phone? Okay, so in 4 years, when I ask the question again at this meetup again, it'll be pretty much everyone in the room, I would imagine. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers for this evening. Stand over here. So to the right, we have Yonatan Feldman, the VP of Mobile at Gilt Groupe. Yonatan has, excuse me for a second here. Yonatan has overseen strategy and execution of Gilt's mobile efforts since 2007. And he is the man responsible for the launch of their award-winning Gilt on the Go app. And since joining, he has helped launch other business categories, including Gilt City, Gilt Japan, Gilt City Japan, and Gilt Taste. Prior to Gilt, Yonatan was the CTO of LQD Adrenalina, is that correct? And he led there the technology direction for the company's brick-and-mortar retail store, their e-commerce, TV, and editorial divisions. He was also the owner of Millipede, where he provided expertise in database-backed web apps, as well as database design and optimization. And to the left is Dominique Essig, the Vice President of Product Management at Gilt. Dominique joined Gilt in July, and right now she oversees the company's product development and user experience teams. Dom has a very vast range of expertise, including North American and global product management, customer service and operations, site quality, customer advocacy, customer experience, and software development. Prior to Gilt, Dom was the Director of Product Management, Hotel and Dynamic Packaging at Travelocity.com. And she was there for 12 years in total and was involved in all sorts of things, including the development of next-generation shopping initiatives for international brands, defining product strategies, managing their life cycles, and positioning new releases, among many other duties. So with that, please welcome our two speakers from Gilt Groupe. Okay, well, I doubt that any of you are unfamiliar with Gilt as a brand and company, but I'd like to, I think, have the speakers begin by just giving a brief overview of Gilt as a company.
So Gilt is launched in late 2007 as a online flash sale model in the luxury space. Flash sales were a term more known now, but it's essentially the concept of taking a sample sale that designers do in New York a couple times a year, putting that model online, so getting limited inventory of really high quality, lowering the price, and letting a bunch of people in at the same time to basically fight for it. And so we've expanded that model into other categories, and we consider ourselves now a lifestyle brand in the luxury space, and we sell everything from women's apparel, men's apparel, kids, home goods, and local experiences in your city, so restaurant, spas, all those kind of things. Anything else about Gilt? That's about Gilt.
Okay, well, I guess it's a good segue into our mobile-specific conversation because, as Jan mentioned, flash sales, that's a very sort of impulse, kind of time-sensitive purchase decision, and what better vehicle than mobile, right? So let's begin by talking about Gilt's history of mobile. When did Gilt first go mobile, and was there an actual concrete trigger for that, or did it just happen organically?
We launched our first app around October 2009, I believe, and it was an app for the iPhone. The iPhone launched in 2007. In 2008, they launched the App Store, and that's when we started thinking about building an app. It seemed and it wasn't a very data-driven decision back then, but it seemed very The demographic of that bought iPhones seemed very aligned with our demographic. And especially given the time-sensitive nature of flash sales, we thought, well, there's people in California driving to work when our sales start at noon Eastern, it's 9 a.m. Pacific. We should definitely give them a chance to buy stuff as well. Hopefully hopefully they pull over, but that's how kind of the germ of the idea started, and it started as a very on the side project that actually took a while because we were scaling the business. The business was scaling very quickly, and we needed to scale our technology as a whole very quickly, and so kind of mobile was a little side project on the side for a few of us, until we launched in '09, and then very quickly it's been growing since then. To some of the numbers you quoted today, it's a very fast-growing business for us.
So if I may ask, what exactly has been the rate of the change here? What percentage of your overall business is mobile accounted for since '09 to now?
So as of today, or not today, but as of now, we sell over 40% of our revenue via mobile experiences. That includes smartphones and tablets. Back then when we launched, we started at 0, but very quickly grew to 5%, 10, 20%, 30, over 40. So we think we're going to sell more on mobile experiences than desktop experiences fairly soon.
Right. I mean, that's close to the halfway mark. So in 4 years, going from 0% to 40%, it's pretty significant.
I mean, and none of us, I don't know if anybody in this room knew, but nobody knew this was what's going to happen. But I mean, if you guys think about how you use how many people here have a smartphone? I'm assuming everybody's going to raise their hand. No? I'm actually very curious. iPhone versus Android? So iPhone, raise your hand.
BlackBerry.
Android? All right. So, what were we talking about?
So I would say just, obviously, as Jan said, kind of north of 40%, but it's also just a massive focus for us as an organization. One of the kind of larger development teams that we have, and we think about every experience and every project or initiative that we're moving forward about mobile first. And it's so important for us and our customer base, and obviously our product. It's a big driver for us.
We have a question from the audience.
I guess I was just going to add on to it. I know that you guys started with the mobile app, but now there's this push towards responsive design and mobile first. So is there a direction towards going overall responsive versus individual apps? Or?
We think about responsive in a different way. One, we definitely want to focus, so kind of overall big vision strategy is we want to create the best mobile experiences in the world. And our biggest audiences are on iOS, iPhone, and iPad, and we want to create the best experiences on those devices that we can. And we think the best way to do that is via native apps. In addition to that, we also want to be everywhere our customers want to be. So if you're on a BlackBerry, if anybody's still on that, or an Android or any other device, a Windows phone, we want to make sure that you can shop on Gilt. So we also provide a great mobile web experience that you can shop from a plethora of devices. And with regards to responsive design, there's different philosophies around responsive design. Take your desktop, make it scale down to a tablet, and make it scale down to a smartphone. We think a lot about actually progressive enhancement. So start with a phone. Make sure you create a fantastic experience there, and as you have more capabilities, either bigger screen size or you have hovers because you have a mouse or trackpad on a desktop, add capabilities to your experience. So a little bit of kind of inverted responsive, if you will.
You're saying iOS is so important for you, but Android, like you've been asking, I'm based out of Singapore, so where in Asia Android is actually taking the market over. Yeah. So iOS is on a declining path there. So I mean, how much you're focusing specifically on especially the Android experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we think about domestic versus international, obviously there's a clear distinction. Our domestic customers today, though, are obviously largely driving kind of and enjoying the iOS experience. So that's obviously been a focus for us. We've had a lot of conversations about how do we continue, though, to invest in and Android, and what is that experience moving forward, especially as we want to continue to play within the international space. But I think it's that interesting dilemma that any technology company or product owner has to manage, which is how do I kind of continue to feed the big beast that drives a lot of my revenue, and also make sure that I invest in the long term. That's a hard question for any organization, and so I think it's how do we manage both as best we possibly can.
So just to continue on that, we, a little bit more specifically, we invest most heavily on iOS because we see 90% of our revenue come from iOS. It's slightly lower internationally. Android over-indexes a bit. It's really about our demographics. So even in the US, there's a lot more Android devices being sold than iPhones, but the people that shop in the luxury space are mostly still on iOS. Now, as we develop apps and platform, our strategy is to invest heavily in the platform to hedge our bet against the kind of, if we need to quickly change, let's say, to Android because we're killing it in Asia and growing very quickly there and need to change our strategy quickly, we can easily do that. That's how we kind of set up our development.
Yeah, if you just look at just global kind of buying patterns between iOS and Android, iOS users are actually buying more products on their mobile device at this time.
The thing is changing, and again, I can only cite Singapore where I see it myself, where like the Android, I mean Samsung S3 and S4 has taken over the market basically, in the luxury segment as well. So
Well, can we do a quick survey of people in the room? So people who have an iPhone, how many of you have made a purchase on that iPhone? That's like maybe 15 people. And then what about Android?
So,
Right,
I mean,
so-
I was just looking at an interesting statistic today. 20% of all mobile users buy something daily, which is really quite interesting, right? 13%
Wow.
actually buy weekly. But 20% of all mobile users are buying something daily. That's quite, startling when you think about just the opportunity out there. With the I was just gonna say with the largest sorry, Jan, with the largest space being kind of apparel and accessories. It's over $1 billion industry.
And it's something we see at Gilt quite a bit is even the visitation rate on mobile is higher than on desktop. So people are really engaged. They buy all kinds of stuff on our mobile apps. They buy items that are worth tens of thousands of dollars on a phone, which was very surprising when it happens, but it happens.
and what's the split between tablet and mobile?
As percentage-wise, the mobile apps do about twice as much. But their
I imagine that will
tablet is
shift as well.
growing, and we see very different usage patterns, and I think it's something we were going to touch on later, but it's not, and it's not necessarily different customers, like you shop on a phone and you shop on a tablet. It's as I move through the day, I use different devices, and maybe I buy something at night, and so that's possibly on the tablet, and if it's at noon, it's probably on a smartphone. We just see very different usage patterns between the devices.
Right, we'll speak more about usage patterns and more specifics with design and features, but I'd like to speak about a general branding or rather strategy type question first, and that's the fact that you have two apps, and I don't think this is very common in the e-commerce realm. So one of them is the aforementioned Gilt on the Go, which is the main Gilt app, but there's also a Gilt City app. So I'd love to hear about how these apps intersect with each other, how they are complementary, and how you just manage them, since Gilt on the Go seems to encompass Gilt City.
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it's actually a question as an organization we really are kind of looking at today and thinking about what's the best experience for our customers that also maintains and respects the brands and thinks about kind of what Gilt City is offering to our customers as well. And so a couple just interesting thoughts and facts, which is Gilt City is obviously one of the largest referrals. Drives over 40% of our referrals to kind of like Gilt. So those people that are actually engaging in Gilt City actually come to Gilt as well, and clearly vice versa. And of those people that actually just really drive into Gilt City and then come over to Gilt, they actually spend more, they're buying more, the kind of the time on the site is actually larger. They're buying actually larger purchases. So Gilt City for us is an incredibly valuable brand. But I think it is a question for us that we still are struggling with a little bit about how do we think about that experience and what actually makes sense for customers. And I actually have a big question I've been posing to my boss about this, and I'd love to maybe get some feedback here, which is, of those people that are familiar with Gilt and Gilt City, do you think about them separately, or do you think about them as the same? So if you think about them separately, raise your hand. Okay. Do you think about them the same? Raise your hand. So to you just go to one, it doesn't matter, you kind of jump between kind of platforms. Okay, that's good feedback.
Yeah, it's when we launched Gilt City, and I was very closely associated with that, the business, and then obviously the mobile app as well. It made a lot of sense it had a very strong separate brand, and it made a lot of sense to launch it separately. But as we can see from the people here raising their hands, our customers think about Gilt as a whole as a lifestyle brand. They know they can buy some blouses, and they can buy to go to dinner with the blouses, or take their spouse on a date. And so it's like Dom said, it's something that we are discussing continually internally. And there's pros and cons for both. If people are curious about what some of those are, we can talk about them, and marketing aspects. We're competing against ourselves in a category in the App Store, for example. So that's a marketing challenge. But then again, it's for people who really care about the Gilt City brand, we can message it really strongly. It's easy to send people to download an app around Gilt City. So there's pros and cons. It's a lot marketing related and a lot about kind of user experience and how our users see our brand. And so it's a continuous kind of discussion internally. The best approach.
Well, let's ask the audience how many of you would be interested in talking a bit further about the Gilt on the go versus Gilt City apps. Okay, and how many would just want to proceed with other matters relating to mobile and design and user experience? Okay, I think that's the slight majority. But I do have a quick question, though, with regard to something you said, Dom. So you mentioned that Gilt City pushes a lot of people to Gilt on the go. Why is that? That could be a very obvious general question, but is it the localization effect, which is kind of a personalization effect, or is it something else entirely?
Well, I think, clearly the site today, naturally, I think, allows that to happen with kind of a ability to jump between stores. So I think that's a pretty obvious example of why people, come into Gilt. Even though the experiences are radically different today, right? When you think about just the design of the two sites, they're really different, and everything about the designs are actually different. There's no registration wall, there's no cart, there's no kind of forced login when you're interacting with Gilt City versus with Gilt. But I do think is just kind of a natural affiliation to kind of shop around and kind of understand and look at the experience. I think that's one of the primary drivers today.
It's sort of like a mini A/B test you're running.
Yeah, I don't know about.
Although that might not be the right analogy. Yeah. So going on to, I guess, design, which is the big question here. Let's talk about why native mobile apps are so important and how you really cannot match that with even responsive desktop versions. Like, what about the aesthetics and functionality of these native mobile apps is so unique?
So I think in both platforms, Android and iOS, but even on iOS, there's a bigger gap between what you can do with a browser and what you can do natively. If you're really good at building native apps, you can create an experience that feels very natural, fluid, fast, and you can do a lot of that in a browser. It just doesn't feel as smooth, as refined. And like I mentioned earlier, our goal is to build the best mobile commerce apps in the world, and we're not going to do that by not using the best tools available. So on iOS, I think there's a significant gap between what you can do with HTML, HTML5 as people build apps in HTML5, and what you can do with the native SDK. And Android, there's a gap as well, but it's not as wide. And the additional kind of difficulties of developing on Android, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the fragmentation issues. And so if we wanted to build the best Android experience in the world, we would have to build a team that's easily 2-3 times the size of our current team. And still it would be a challenge. And given, for us in particular, given that most of our users are in iOS, it doesn't make the most sense to make that huge of an investment in Android. But for us in particular, the gap, because the gap isn't as wide as on iOS, it just makes sense to make a great HTML5 experience that people can use on Android and shop. It's just not going to be the best experience in the world. Does that answer your question?
Most definitely. Thank you. And I'd like to, unless Dom, you want to add to that? Okay. So I'd love to delve now into more specifics of design. As most of you might be aware, Gilt apps are so award-winning because they're incredibly streamlined and user-friendly and just pretty. So I'd love to hear more about what you two think are the most important design elements and why they're so important. Ranging from like product image size to...
Yeah. So Jan would say pretty is the most important. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, yeah. The other P word, performance. So clearly, I think we both agree on that. Having an experience that's fast, lightweight, that just reacts, instantaneously to what the customer wants. And as Jan said, we're really trying to drive the best experience for every particular user, no matter how they want to reach out and interact with Gilt. And so we try to make sure, whether it's the iPad or whether it's the iOS app, that we're designing that experience to be as relevant as possible. And then I think the other aspect of it that Gilt really also tries to focus on too, and we'll talk a little bit about the image size because that's obviously a really defining characteristic for us, but another piece for us is innovation and creating kind of making sure that innovation is also important. And clearly the most important thing is about allowing customers to meet their needs and to achieve the task, right, which is we want them to buy beautiful rompers or beautiful skirts or beautiful blouses or the great experience. But so the site has to work and it has to be kind of easy and streamlined, but we also really want to make sure we drive innovation. And so we do have a lot of features in there that kind of just create a very cool experience for our customers that hopefully drive a sticky environment that they are passionate about and really enjoy. And then I think obviously one of the most important kind of characteristics for Gilt that we feel is a pretty strong pillar for us is our imagery, and that's even getting better and better, especially as you interact on a tablet. And so we were sharing this, statistics earlier, which is we actually shoot about 70% of our own images, and we have one of the largest studios in the city that's working pretty much all the time. And so that we feel like gives users a great experience on seeing the product, and that when you find that deal and you're buying something that can be a little bit more expensive, that you really can almost feel like you're touching it to some extent because the imagery is so important.
Yeah, we like to kind of really try to distill the experience to what our users want to do as much as possible, not try to clutter it, and take advantage of the capabilities of the different devices to make that shopping experience even better. Simple, fast, and fun are 3 words that we use a lot. I'm sure you guys have heard for other startups, but like try to distill it to what the user wants to do, which is find a great product, make sure that they like it and buy it, and make that easy, fast, and fun. So we throw things in there to try to make it fun.
Talk a bit more about the exact features that make Gilt apps so easy, fast, and fun. I mean, I know the one in which you can take a picture of yourself and then superimpose products on that picture to sort of try things on.
The sunglasses?
The sunglasses, yes. Can we talk a bit more about those types of things?
So one of the things we try to do a lot is figure out what can help users shop. In different types of products, we'll have different things that'll help them shop. I have a really hard time buying sunglasses, so and so do many of our users. How do I know that they look good on me and not? So we decided to have a little bit of fun and see. There was an engineer on the team that wanted to play around with AR and try to figure out if we could do this. Do some face detection, put a pair of sunglasses on your face, and then make it into a useful feature to help our member base shop. So this is kind of like in the of simple, fast, and fun. In the fun realm of the spectrum, it's really kind of it's a beta feature. It's to play around, but it's also useful. It's helped me buy sunglasses. I can state that for myself. I don't know if for the rest of our member base, although it does see usage. And it's something that we continue to explore. And as we get into talking about how we envision what we build for each platform, we can kind of, we'll get into this. We envision this feature, like we don't want to put this feature necessarily on the iPad. It might make sense. But on the iPad, we might want to do something like, how does this texture look with my rug or with my sofa? Because people use their iPad more at home. They're with their furniture. They're browsing in a more kind of leisurely, relaxed environment or mode. And so it's how do we take each experience and the different categories of products and find interesting ways to help people buy, explore, discover.
So I would just say it's not much different than when you're walking into a store, right? So think about your experience. You're walking into a store today. What actually drives your kind of reaction to say, I'm going to buy something today? And so we look at how do we get into the customer's minds? How do we make that instantaneous decision so easy for them? Whether that's trying something on, or how do they see what the color looks like, or I want to kind of zoom in on the texture. So just think about it as you're walking to a retail store. What actually changes my mind to say, oh, I'm going to get that? We're just trying to actually really replicate that within your mobile device, sitting at home in your pajamas, right?
That was an excellent point, and I'd love to also hear the inverse of that. So are there features you've tried out that just haven't worked or that you just know will not work? I've heard, for example, that video on smartphones is not a good idea, but that could be rendered obsolete in a couple of years.
Yeah, we were actually talking about talking about that as well, because there are obviously organizations and companies that do that very well today. I mean, Zappos is a great example, who sells a lot of shoes via video, and their experience is very similar on the app than it is on the desktop today. I think you just have to be really mindful and careful. Is that what really actually converts customers? Is it a better view? I think the experience that we offer with our imagery allows customers to have a view into what possibly the video helps them solve, right? So they're looking at the video because they're trying to get a better sense of the product today. I think we offer a really great experience with our with our imagery that allows customers to get that kind of in-depth feel. It's not to say that we'd rule out video, but I think we solve a problem there a little bit differently.
Yeah, we definitely pay a lot of attention to what features we don't add to a particular platform or to all the platforms. We don't necessarily want to take the experience we have on the site and say all those features have to exist on our iPhone app or our iPad app or our mobile web experience or our Android app. We try to figure out, yes, this feature is really helpful on the iPhone. It makes sense. We have to find a way to include it. Obviously, there's different size constraints, so we can't just have everything. There's data constraints, battery constraints. It actually, I think, helps drive a lot of good decision making about what's really important to the business, because there's just a lot of constraints that help you make better design decisions.
So I was just going to say, we were actually talking about this today and getting into a little bit of a healthy debate, because I absolutely 100% agree with Jan. And one of the things we were talking about, though, is that does sometimes leave a slightly different experience from one platform to the next. And so my question was simply, because I think a lot about the customer, which was, how do our customers feel about that when they see features on one experience versus not having it on another? And I was expressing my frustration, I'll bet, though, on just one small little feature that's not that important, except to me, which is not a majority. But we were talking about that, and as I'm sitting at home in my bed and I'm looking at my iPad and I'm going through our site, not having a certain feature available, can sometimes create a different experience for customers. And so we were simply debating that topic a little bit.
Yeah, and to that point, we are very careful about making sure we don't create kind of friction or pain for users as they switch experiences. And so some features we develop first on one platform and then try to quickly get them on other platforms if it makes sense, or sometimes it doesn't happen so quickly. Case in point, the feature Dom was referring to. But for, I don't even remember what it was. Oh, it's some small sub-feature of our waitlist feature that doesn't exist on the iPad apparently. But there's some features that, for example, the sunglass try-on feature, maybe it makes sense on the iPad. I don't necessarily think it's a must-have on the iPad. And maybe for that kind of feature, like I was mentioning earlier, something related to home products, where iPad actually over-indexes over the other channels that we sell on, is on home products, might make more sense. So we want to make sure that we target the right experiences to the right platforms. So feature parity isn't necessarily a goal, but product parity is more of a goal. So make sure that if whatever device or experience you're on, you're not going to miss out on those, Louboutin shoes because you happen to be on the iPad. That's more important.
Very important distinction. So the product-first approach. It's almost like a personalization based upon the platform as well as the operating system, in a sense. Different kind of personalization. Great. So I think we've already touched to some degree upon the difference between the phone and the tablet. But I haven't actually asked the question directly, which is, can you talk through these differences in more detail? What are some, definite phone-specific features? What are definite tablet-specific? And which are, in the gray no man's area between the two?
So the usage patterns of tablets versus smartphone are fairly different. There's obviously overlap. People buy it known across all the channels. We see an over-indexing on tablet in the evening around like the 8, 9 p.m.-ish time frames. The iPad, spikes versus all the other channels. We know that we can see that session times are longer on the iPad, especially around those times in the evening. So people are using it what's the word we use? Leisurely experience, if you will. More like browsing a magazine, if you will.
And as a result, we see higher conversion on the iPad as well.
It also has, it's our highest converting channel. And so we target the experiences based on those usage patterns and based on the capabilities of the device. So the iPad, much bigger images. It's kind of like all about the images. You can get into the materials of items really closely, and like Dom mentioned, like almost feel like you're touching the fabric. The smartphone experience is much more get in, find what you want, get out, buy it, or didn't find what you want, get out. It's not as leisurely, it's very transactional. And we think about those different usage patterns as we're figuring out which features to put in which device or how to build the same feature for the different experiences. It won't necessarily be exactly the same. So about the specific features, we talked about the sunglasses try-on being on the phone. That's the kind of thing that I'm playing with, and that seems more reasonable. People use more as a camera than an iPad. The imagery on the iPad is a big feature, like taking advantage of that big screen and other tablets, but like we mentioned, big iOS customer base. The big screen, the Retina display, we mentioned we shoot 70-80% of the stuff that we sell. It's a big advantage because when Retina displays came out, we went to our production team and said, hey, we really want to upload much higher resolution images so you can get really deep and see the products. And we changed our entire process, photography process, the upload process to how this data flows through our services and our apps to be able to do that. And the fact that we're vertically integrated with our photo studios, if you will, allows us that possibility. And so really taking advantage of those Retina displays and getting in deep on products is a big feature of the iPad.
Great. Well, it seems as if all these features are pretty rapidly changing and evolving as the platforms themselves evolve. So I'd love to take a step back now and sort of examine the future. It's a huge competitive space, mCommerce, and the pace of change itself is, in a sense, a competitive factor. So you're always having to update. So I'd love to hear more about, I guess, your challenges in this space and how quickly, how often do you have to update the features and change them?
Well, I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge as much as an opportunity. And Jan talked a little bit about this before, which is just making sure we're always present and always available, and that for customers it's easy. So for us, I think we are constantly trying to make sure we think about that experience on mobile, on desktop, on mobile web, the various different types of devices. And so could be somewhat a challenge, but also somewhat an opportunity, is how we stay present across all of the verticals. And creating somewhat a unified experience. And so I think that's obviously incredibly important. And then second, I think it's always making sure that we have a sense of what customers need and want. I have a huge passion for being on the product side about understanding what our customers are saying and what's their voice. And I always talk about with my team the voice of the customer. And so I think that to me, that's incredibly important. So really staying on cutting edge and making sure that we're not only pushing ourselves about how we think about the experience and product, but how our customers think about that is incredibly important. I think one of the things, and I think the team just did this, which is really important, is just a lot of interaction with users. And so whether that's kind of more formalized user testing, doing it on the web with usertesting.com, one of those, or even doing just kind of guerrilla testing. I think that's so important to really get some sense, right? Walk into a Starbucks and ask some people how they feel about an experience. But I love that interaction, to me, that can really point you in the right direction. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I would add to that, in addition to being very close to the customers, a customer service team is a team we interact with a lot. We get we get all the customer feedback email. Everybody on the team reads it and kind of pays a lot of attention to it. So very close to the customer, and then using data to figure out kind of how we need to adjust day to day. So to the Android point, like we're always looking at how much revenue we're getting from Android or from X platform or Windows platform. When we first launched mobile web, our first target platform was BlackBerry. We couldn't care less about BlackBerry these days. We don't pay attention to what the experience, we don't test on it or anything like that. So we're always adjusting based on data, and then we use our technology stack to be able to do that more and more easily every day. So we invest a lot in our technology stack to be able to hedge those bets, leverage the technology to be able to make adjustments quickly. We look at a lot of data. We A/B test a lot in mobile, in Gilt in general. And even though the tools for mobile are very rudimentary for A/B testing, we try to do as much as we can, look at analytics data, and then have very, very close contact with our customers.
Well, speaking of the customers and knowing what their needs are, I read recently that Gilt has initiated personalization, and I'd love to hear about how that plays into mobile and just knowing more about the customer through their past purchases. Yeah,
so we don't think about it, I don't think we think about it any differently on mobile than we would think about it on desktop. Which is that it's an obviously incredibly powerful tool, and I think one that we just will continue to get better and better at. I mean, clearly, I think Amazon started this space a couple years ago. Although I don't know about you, I get a little bit frustrated with my Amazon recommendations. I think it was offering me a Palm Pilot cover for like years, and I was like, clearly that's not where I'm at. So I think we've just really started to emerge in what personalization is, but I think we've seen that it's obviously being very beneficial for us as an organization, but also for our customers. And I think it really also points to not just about what we're driving, but I think in what we're seeing really within the web space and particularly within retail, but which is really customers, I think, want the opportunity to truly cultivate their own experience. You even think about the recent change with Gmail, right, which is really about putting data and control back into the customer's hands. That is a different form of personalization, but it allowing customers to kind of move different email messages and different suppliers from one tab to the other. I see that as a very similar kind of trait. So to me, it's about creating and driving relevant messages, obviously, and offers for our customers, but them also having that ability to really help drive their experience. I think that makes them more engaged and obviously more relevant to us as well.
Yeah, that was great. I think we're almost nearing the end of this moderated conversation segment, but I'd love to ask one more question about purchasing philosophy. I read recently that from a Kantar media study that men apparently purchase more on mobile than women do. Have you guys seen this trend in your analytics? And are there other trends that might be interesting to discuss that you've noticed?
Well, we were talking earlier, so we actually over-index a little bit on the mom factor, which is kind of an interesting, so we actually have more moms buying more really expensive children's clothes, and I have 2 kids, I wouldn't buy it, but really expensive children's clothes on our mobile devices than we see on desktop, which is actually really interesting. You think about those moms on the go, running around Manhattan, they just have to buy that cool new outfit. So that's obviously a pretty interesting statistic and a little bit kind of off the wall that you wouldn't really think about for us. But I don't think as far as men driving more, we clearly drive kind of for our customers, it's heavier on the women's side, obviously.
The percentages, we might over-index a little bit more on men, but the percentages are pretty equivalent to the site. The mom on the go, its kind of persona is pretty strong at Gilt, and that particular persona is very heavy on mobile, so kids tends to over-index.
Great. Well, with that, I'd love to open this up to the floor, to the audience for questions, since we've already had a bit of that, but now it's the full immersion. Yes.
Yeah, one more. You just mentioned Gmail on the tabs, so which in many cases leads now that email marketing goes into those tabs and you don't get as much retention probably. How much are you using mobile there? I mean, mobile email / also maybe push messages to reactivate customers. Is it something you're?
Yeah, so it's definitely, Gilt is a big email marketing company. We rely on the email quite a bit, and this is definitely a challenge for us, but with the big kind of move to mobile that customers are doing, it's a little bit less significant. And then with the availability of push for browsers that Google and Apple are providing, hopefully we can leverage some of that and then try to find other channels to communicate with our members.
Yeah, no, and I would just say, obviously, as John said, Gilt is obviously a big driver of push notifications, and that's kind of a core piece of our experience today, and we find a lot of customers find that incredibly useful, and especially as we think about kind of reminding the noon. But I will say that is a problem we think about a lot, definitely something I'm thinking about a lot, about how do I drive notification and customer interaction, how do I make sure I'm always, whether it's an email or push or some other channel, really reaching out and grabbing that customer and pulling them into the site at noon for a really engaging experience.
More questions, please.
So, I mean, one thing about shopping just like out in the world is, like for me, it's all about like my girlfriend's recommendations and like, just bringing other people into it to help you out. And I mean, I've designed for e-commerce a lot in the past, and that's one that's just so tough to crack. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, what your thoughts are for now, for the future, iOS 7, if there's anything you can like take advantage of there.
That is, it was funny because we were just meeting on this today, and we were talking about what really drives people to kind of buy something, and I was giving an example about a colleague who I was asking, where did you get those jeans? And she said, oh, you got to get these jeans, and she was recommending them, but based on that recommendation, really drove me to a store that I'd never been before, into an experience, right, to try something on, to activate, to buy something. So we talk a lot about that. How do we think about creating a more personal experience? How do we do that in the flash sale space? I think is a little bit harder than traditional e-com. So I think it's thinking about the experience, whether it's refer a friend or they provided me some guided recommendations. And then even just I think in your thought around like kind of fit, that's obviously a pretty massive problem just in retail in general. How do I know this actually fits me versus that product, and which one should I buy? So I think that's something we definitely think about as well. And I don't think anybody's really cracked that 100%, so it's still a problem we're thinking about a lot.
Yeah, social commerce space is, we were very popular term in, I don't know, a year or two ago, and everybody was trying to solve. To Dom's point, I don't think anybody has. It's something we do think about a lot. There's all kinds of cool features that I think we can take advantage of in iOS and Android, even on desktop, around shopping with your friends or getting recommendations or getting feedback on products really quickly. The Flash model and the 10-minute reservation model that Gilt has makes that even more challenging. But I think that's actually really exciting and can create a lot of excitement. I can imagine, and we've discussed features where you can get feedback from your trusted network of friends while things are in your cart, and use push notifications to do that in real time. And these kinds of devices kind of allow you to do that real-time feedback. You don't have to wait for email. You don't have to wait for Facebook, and it's just kind of very instant. So I think there's a lot of exploration to be done here still, and somebody's going to come up with something really cool in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the cart historically seems like hands off.
Yep.
Make the transaction, but yeah, it's interesting that you brought up that point. Like that's where you're still not sure a lot of times.
You're going right or left, right?
So imagine like sending out I can hit a button and the things in my cart go to my 5 trusted friends that I trust on style, and everybody gets like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and I get that feedback as they're giving it. And so like,
So I think of it a little
just
bit
a crazy
like,
idea.
No, I like it, but I think of it's a little bit like hot or not, right? So it's like thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing, right? Did you like this blouse? Did you not? Kind of thing.
Would it look good on me?
Yeah.
And if I can get that feedback instantly, I mean, at Gilt, that's kind of like a requirement. It's
Yeah.
like,
So to Jan's point, that's so important because we operate in a kind of a space where you have a limited cart, you have a certain amount of time, you have to buy that product now, otherwise we put it back out, and so it's even more important to make sure it's relevant and quick.
and yeah, but the challenge is like we really don't want to distract people from buying stuff and having stuff expire, and so kind of balancing those things is challenging. And but it's something we think about. We brainstorm about this kind of stuff often, and one day we'll get to implementing something cool.
Well, it speaks to Dom's point in a previous question about having it mimic real-life experiences, because oftentimes when shopping for clothes in particular, we have friends or family members, and they sort of assess us or say, yes, buy that, or no, don't. It's very rare for someone to go into, like a dress store, try on a fancy dress, and buy that because, she just thinks it looks good. There usually is another judgment involved, so
Yeah,
that
and
feature would.
flash sales or sample sales have a complete kind of additional dynamic around not only the rush, but the environment you're in. You think of a physical sample sale, you go with your friends to this, I don't know, how many people here have been to a sample sale, like a high-end, and so I'm guessing the women in this room know how crazy it can be. Can I get a show of hands? It's like, pretty crazy environment. You go with a friend, and it's like grab, and it's like you think yes, no, okay, in the bag, and continue. And we see some of that behavior online. In the past, we've seen people shopping Gilt in groups. So we have like 4 friends sitting around lunch because it's at noon at a table, and each one is shopping a different sale and adding things to cart, even if they think it's like for the friend that's sitting over here, and sharing stuff that way. So we think about social commerce also in those terms, of like how can we enable that real life behavior that people do in the real world, either in a physical sample sale or the real life behavior they're already doing with our property. How can we enable that, make it easier, et cetera?
More questions? Yes?
I was curious about the process behind a lot of these decisions. Does Gilt have a particularly unique process of, from feature to implementation and looking at it and that sort of thing?
I don't think it's particularly unique. We try to enable and trust the teams as much as possible. So the mobile team is pretty independent, and we align with kind of the overall company strategy and make sure that we're trying to push that strategy. And we have our own goals that we want to meet within that strategy. So if it's a big strategy to increase revenue, we try to prioritize more features that increase revenue. And overall, it's like your standard stuff. We want to have a fair amount of revenue. We want to create really good experiences for our users because we think that drives long-term value and these kinds of things. So we try to align with that. And then the list of ideas is endless, right? And so then it's like trying to figure out which ideas we think are going to drive those the most, try to sprinkle a little bit of the simple, fast, and fun into there, so not everything is absolutely revenue driving. You know, the sunglasses try-on is not a revenue driving feature. It drives a lot of PR, which in the end drives revenue, but it's not a direct revenue driving feature. And we think it's good for users as well. And so we kind of allow the team to make their own decisions about what they're prioritizing, and you know, if in the long term we're making bad decisions, we need to make adjustments, but that hasn't been the case. Does that make sense? So provide people autonomy and trust and the right kind of guardrails, if you will, around what are the company objectives.
More questions? Yes?
This is kind of an office functioning question, going off of his question. Like, how often do you get together and review your analytics, and does the mobile team work with your online marketing team? Do you guys have like weekly meetings, or is it a daily thing?
Yeah, we actually have marketing people as part of the mobile team as well. We work constantly with them every day. And we're constantly reviewing data and analytics, and different teams operate in different ways, but we have an entire data engineering team that helps provide and analyze data for the entire business, and everybody kind of works with that team to get the data that they need, and we use some tools that aren't provided by that team as well, but we're pretty much in the data all the time and working with online marketing. We're also very much in the data all the time. The whole company is. To make these decisions.
Yeah, I would just say it's because I'm actually relatively new, right? So I've only been there almost a little over 2 months, but I'd say it's an incredibly empowered organization. So it's not left up to somebody to say, okay, let's review the data like next week and we'll get together. It's like you're pretty much driving forward your decisions in your team. So we have these really kind of teams which are inclusive of kind of product and maybe project and developers and engineers and designers, and they're really empowered to just keep running full speed. So if they release daily, or if they release every 3 days or every week or every month, that's really up to them. The goalposts and where we want them to get to is very defined, and what they should be driving, but how they get there is really up to creating, that's their path of how they want to drive that. Clearly we don't want them to take the longest one, but they really are empowered to find the best way and to innovatively think, I think this will move my metric, and sometimes we're wrong, and we say, wow, we've learned from that, and the A/B test, the either user data or the A/B testing data will tell us we hit the wrong kind of milestone, and so we backtrack a little bit and keep moving forward.
If I can add to that, we also, we kind of publicize our data of how the different teams are doing against their KPIs. So one of the things we do is define KPIs for the team. So if your goal as a team is to move revenue or loyalty or repeat visitation, we'll create KPIs around that, and we publish the data kind of on an internal website, so anybody in the company can go see, okay, how are we doing on repeat visitation? And this is a team driving it. What projects did they do against that? What A/B tests have they run? And it's really empowering for the teams because they don't have to kind of meddle with people around what projects they're doing. They're like, we're trying all this stuff and we're testing and we're moving forward, and I think there's a lot of kind of companies trying to operate that way, hopefully. Really empower teams.
I just have a quick question on analytics. I know that the e-commerce on-site conversion rate, they sort of say the average or the benchmark is 1 to 3%, or if you're Lanzan, it's like 13% or what have you. I'm sort of curious, is there something similar for mobile? Like, are you guys seeing similar conversion rates as your desktop channel? Yeah.
Yeah, we define visits right now a little bit different on mobile than on the site, so it makes it hard to compare conversion rates. If we normalize to how we measure a visit, we tend to see higher conversion rates on our iPad app, our iPhone app, in general in mobile, than on the site. But people use the experiences very differently. To be completely honest, they're different experiences. The apps don't require you to register to browse products. Like only when you go to add to cart do you need to log in or register. So the experiences are fairly different, and we just kind of we try to compare historically within a platform. So I made this feature on the iPhone app. Did that improve my conversion on the iPhone or not? And we have to do a little bit more manual consolidated kind of thinking for when we're trying to think of the business as a whole. We don't have one conversion rate right now. We have a few.
Yeah, I was just sharing this though. When you just look at those users coming from the M.dot site to Gilt, they do convert on average about 40 bips higher than kind of just typical people who are coming to Gilt desktop. So, I mean, just to Jan's point, highly engaged users when they're coming from mobile and jumping into desktop. Right.
Just building on that new user acquisition, how much are you using mobile, maybe mobile advertising even for that?
Yeah, a lot. Right now we spend over 50% of our acquisition budget on mobile. It's a right now a more efficient acquisition channel. And we talk about mobile as one channel, like this whole discussion of using the term mobile as it's one thing. It's really a bunch of things, that are, some are more mobile than others, but smartphones, tablets are right now really efficient acquisition channels for us. And so we're spending a significant amount of our money there.
And the experience-wise, between Gilt City and the normal Gilt, and maybe also more interactive things than just a banner ad? I mean, are you doing anything there?
Most of it is on banner ads in other apps and experiences. We're not, we haven't gotten into kind of your iAd, more interactive experiences yet, but we do, last year we did a TV campaign, which did really well for us, and TV is still surprisingly good acquisition channel, even for, yeah, and so I think we're exploring that further.
You guys touched quite a bit on content in terms of imagery, which is definitely, I agree, very important. Can you talk a little bit about the written word and how you see that being? I mean, my experience with Gilt as a brand, as a lifestyle brand, I'll visit Gilt Man once in a while.
Gilt Manual?
Yeah, the Gilt Manual, sorry. And yeah, I think that's really well done. It's a nice introduction to the products, but that's one thing. Like when you talked about Gilt City, I was one of the people who thought of that as a separate thing. And I'm just wondering, like, as you seek to build this more cohesive brand, is the written word something that might pull it all together, especially on tablet?
No, it's a great question. So I'd say we're kind of in the midst of that conversation today, and what is editorial to us, and how does it help how does it help our brand, how does it hurt our brand, and how do we drive that experience? So we're really right in the midst of just making that decision, and then thinking about, so clearly the Gilt Manual, and we have we have a blog for kids, and we have one for obviously women as well. Those are clearly sources where people go and find information, and we kind of drive a little bit of style guidance, but it's not something that's really integral into our overall site experience today. So we've been thinking about, do we need to play more into our experience? And then it gets back to the question, which is, how do you also not, get in people's way as it relates to just allowing them to get through the funnel? So I think you have to balance both of those, and that's a little bit of a tough conversation. So we're still, I think, trying to figure out what that is today, but a big question for us right now.
There was a question on the right side, although I don't know if it exists anymore. Okay. Well, I have one final question, but there's no more, and this is very specific. I'd love to hear more about the car, sales of that level. Will you have more in the future? Will it expand to other things like houses? I mean, that could be a bit of a leap, but I'd love to hear about like the big sales.
Yeah, so we have sold cars in the past, and we actually will sell a couple more. So we recently just had a relationship and where we sold 3 Acura cars, but it was a little bit, it's not just about selling the car, it's about selling kind of a little bit more about the experience. So we sold 3 Acura cars, but that was also came with kind of a package. One was the Jazz Fest, like all VIP passes to Jazz Fest. One was Sundance Film Festival, and the other one was like, I think, an Earth, Wind, and Fire concert. All 3 sold.
Cars and concerts.
Yeah, so the first one sold from a mobile device. So I'm never surprised that people buy a $45,000 car their mobile device, and they do it, and we sell out instantaneously. So it's within like the first minute, right? Seconds, yeah. And so we have another one coming up in kind of the fall and holiday, and that's actually not just again about selling a car, but selling about the experience. And so we'll sell 2 cars that have been custom by designers. And so it's more about kind of mixing fashion with the car to kind of create something that's different, and you really are buying kind of a one of a kind. So that's, I think, important for us. It's not just about selling a car, because we've done that a lot, but it's about how do we sell something that's unique and cool and different, and that our customers think is valuable.
And the price points, I mean, that people buy at, I think are, you used to hear a lot, oh, they'll spend less on the phone. Your average order values are smaller on the phones or on mobile. And I think as you guys are, observing in your own behavior, people are just buying whatever on any platform. It doesn't matter.
We did sell a plane. It wasn't really a plane as much as you could charter a plane. So you could charter a plane, and you could design the plane, and you could take a bunch of your friends anywhere you want to go.
Was that the biggest sale you've ever had on mobile?
It was Virgin America. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it's I don't know.
It was a Gilt City offer.
It was a Gilt City. I don't think we sold the plane on mobile. The most expensive items we've sold are, the cars. We sell a lot of vintage high-end watches like Rolexes, $24,000 watches, jewelry. Really expensive gowns, all kinds of people buy.
So I'll be at lunch, and I'm looking on the site and eating at my desk, and I'll see, and I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful necklace, and then I see that it's like $24,000, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just pass, keep going on, right? I'm not going to buy the emerald $24,000, yeah. So, but we've never been surprised by what people buy on their iPhones.
Or surprised every day. It's pretty crazy. I don't know which way you have to feel about it.
So are there any last questions or thoughts? I also meant to ask the audience what features you guys would be interested in seeing. But we could talk about that over informal discussion as well. Okay. Well, Dom and Jan, do you have any last bits of insight or wisdom that kind of summarize this whole mCommerce experience, where it's going, where it's now, where it's been?
I just think we continue to be impressed by the size of the space, and that it's just constantly growing. And I think Jan has really said it well about it's about, for us at Gilt, it's about how do we create the best experience for our customers, depending on how they're accessing us at that particular moment. So.
Yeah, I'd say just what we've done is just be very open to our customers and very in tune with what our customers are doing, and be very open to what's going on. Like nobody could have ever imagined we'd be selling 40% of our revenue through phones and tablets. And so just, be very open to what's going on. In 5 years, it's not going to be phones and tablets. It's going to be something we haven't thought of yet. This has been, in 2007, there wasn't an iPhone, right? Like, that's just 6 years ago. Things have changed dramatically. They're going to change even faster. So we just have to all be very open to what's going on out there, and in tune with what customers are doing.
Okay. Well, on that very positive and exciting note, we're going to open it up now to general mingling over wine and nibbles in the back. So please stick around if you can. If not, thank you so much for coming. Hope you had a fabulous time. And our next meetup is actually going to be later this month, September 25th. And it sort of intersects with Gilt in the sense that it's on global. So mobile going global, internationalization, global strategy, product market fit, and it's at this startup called Noom in Chelsea, Noom, and they focus on weight loss. And they have offices in Germany and Korea, as well as the States. So if you want to hear about that, go to bktk.org and join us. Thanks again so much for coming, and please stick around for drinks. Great.
Hey,